Hi Connects. I'm planning to develop an e-tail system, which is an internet-based e-commerce application for buyer and seller. I'm planning to drop videos on the development of this application, and I'm going to explain the way how it is going to be developed from the scratch. So it's going to be a step-by-step process. So in order to develop this e-tail system, first we need to understand what are all the tech stacks that we are going to use. So in order to drop the first video, I have come up with a list of tech stacks which I could explain to you people, so that going forward we'll be following those tech stacks to develop this e-tail system. Now, this e-tail system is going to carry multiple services. In the list of services, the first one is user registration and authentication services. And the second service that we are going to develop is user account management. And the third is product search, where the users can search for the product, and there are features where we can recommend the products for the users based on their earlier search and their preferable choice of products that they purchase. Based on that, we can give some recommendations as well. And we are going to develop a product comparisons for the users to conveniently get to know the differences between the products. We are also going to have the cart details features, which is a very common features in e-commerce application. And we'll be developing an order processing system and payment transactions, products shipping service, where we need to track the shipment details of the products that's going to be delivered to the user, and order tracking and messaging system, and inventory management and product reviews and rating, and seller-based details like seller profile management, seller verification, seller rating and review, seller support system, seller commission and fees management, and seller performance metrics. So whatever services that I've listed right now is just the minimal number of services. But as this application grows in its development process, we might be coming up with more new features and services to be added onto it. Now, before I take you to the list of tech stacks that we will be using, I would like to give a small understanding of what we are going to cover in the development of this e-tail system. The very first thing is we need to have a front-end system for this. So we'll be using Angular as the base for developing a front-end application for this e-tail system. And the second is, of course, the backend. And for the backend, we are going to use Spring Boot. But are we going to stop with this? No. There are multiple other tech stacks which we will be including into this development of this e-tail system. Now, before I take you to the list of further tech stacks that we will be introducing into the backend development and as well as the front-end development, I would like to explain what this term e-tail means. So why I named this application to be called as an e-tail. So let's quickly go ahead and prompt to the ChatGPT on asking for the definition for e-tailing system. Get to know some base definitions. So it's literally an e-commerce system. More technically, today we are calling it as an e-tailing. So I derived the name of this application from this e-tailing term as e-tail. So e-tail is nothing but electronic retailing or online retailing. So some examples of this e-tailing system is all about Amazon or eBay or Alibaba. All these are some of the instances that we can include for this e-tailing system. Let's move forward to understand the other list of tech stacks that we will be using in the development of this e-tail system. So now looking at the tech stacks, the very first thing is, yes, of course, we need to start with JDK. So I'm going to use JDK 18 version. The backend framework is Spring Boot, as I've already stated. The front end is Angular and the backend is Spring Boot. And we are going to use build and dependency management on top of Maven. Of course, we do have Gradle, but my choice is Maven. I'm more experienced in using Maven-based dependency management system for Spring Boot. The next is the database. We need to talk about the database, which is very essential for any application. So PostgreSQL is what we are going to use. The PostgreSQL relational database is going to be used for storing product information, customer data, orders, tracking order details, seller details. So there are further more data which we need to handle on top of this e-tail system. So throughout the development of this application, the singular database that we are going to use is PostgreSQL relational database. And to highlight, this development is on top of monolith, so it's not a microservice application at present, but as we go along in the development, we might look forward to migrate the monolith application into a microservices. So you can ask a question, why can't you develop a microservice based application for the e-tail system right away? Literally, the way we need to develop an application is to start with monolith, so that we will have more real-time experience on how to migrate an existing monolith application into a microservice application. And for the RESTful APIs, we are going to use Spring Web to create e-tail systems RESTful APIs, which allows the communication between the front end and the back end. And the ORM tool, Object Relational Mapping, we are going to use Hibernate with Spring Data JPA. So Spring Data JPA library sits on top of Hibernate. So the core is Hibernate, but we are going to work on top of Spring Data JPA, and we are going to use and maximize all the best features of Spring Data JPA in this development of this e-tail application. The next is Spring Security, very important because we need to bring the user authentication and authorization services onto this e-tail system. So we are going to use Spring Security for it, and if there is a requirement, we might be using JWT, which is a JSON Web Tokens, and also there's a plan for adopting the OAuth implementation, Open Authentication Services, in place of the security. But initially, we are going to start with the Spring Security for the authentication and authorization, and then we'll be upgrading it to JWT and OAuth. Caching is another important feature that we need to add when it comes to an e-commerce application. So I'm going to use Redis as a tech stack for caching, and it is used for implementing the caching mechanism to optimize the performance of frequently accessed data. So search functionality. For search functionality, we are going to use Elasticsearch, and this is going to be used for product search and filtering. And messaging system, as I already highlighted, we'll be having a messaging system as well. So in e-tail system, various events might trigger notification to the customers, like for example, order confirmations or shipment status, or it could be a delivery notifications or any special offers that we need to convey to the customer. Then probably we need a healthy messaging system, and that will be implemented with the help of a RabbitMQ. Of course, we have a Kafka and ActiveMQ tools, but I prefer for RabbitMQ because this is going to be more relevant for an application development like e-tail systems, which is an e-commerce based application. So we are not going to deal with any real-time data manipulations or real-time messaging approaches. So we don't need to go for Kafka at this point of time. And for logging, we are going to use Log4j, and which is used to capture the application logs. So throughout the application, we'll be using the Log4j effectively for capturing the logs. And API testing, of course, I'm going to use Postman for testing the RESTful APIs of e-tail system application. And for deployment of this e-tail system, Docker. So containerizing the e-tail system application, even though it's going to be a monolith, I'm going to containerize that application for easier deployment. And where I'm going to deploy is, of course, it's going to be on top of the cloud. So Amazon EC2 instance at present. So I'm not going to use any ECS like container service. Instead, I'm going to use EC2 Linux instance. And on top of that instance, I'm going to deploy Docker, and I'm going to ensure my e-tail system runs on top of the Docker containers inside the Amazon EC2 instance. Amazon S3. So why do we need to use Amazon S3 at this point? Is like, for example, we need to store product images. There might be millions of products. I think Amazon S3 plays a major role here. And so we are going to use the Amazon S3 service exclusively for product search, product images, storing the product images and storing user avatars if in case we need to capture, or any other files which need to be captured or stored on the cloud. We prefer to go for Amazon S3. Front-end application development stacks, we are going to use NPM, which is a node package manager, and Angular, and material UI designs. So the UI is going to be on top of the material UI approach. And we are going to use a lot of tabular components here and there. So we are going to use AGGrid, which is a community edition. So AGGrid is more of licensed. So I prefer to choose AGGrid Community Edition in order to bring up more dynamic tabular components. And again, we are going to Dockerize this front-end application. So we need Docker for it. And I'm going to deploy them into the AWS environment. So front-end stack is more simplified. It's straightforward. So NPM, Angular, Material UI, AGGrid. As a very first step, we are going to focus on developing APIs first. That is from the backend. And then we are going to move forward to the front-end application development as well for the designed API that we have already created. Stay tuned for next interesting step on developing this ETL system, a creation of a data dictionary. Right, a data dictionary is very important. So the next video which I'm going to drop is going to be on top of the data dictionary for the ETL system.